Hey there, I'm Sean and I'm your quiz master, and I've got questions from the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s to test your brain and give you a mental workout. So, without further ado, let's get started with question number 1. Which iconic 1950s game show, hosted by Groucho Marx, featured contestants answering questions to win cash prizes? What's My Line? The Price is Right, or You Bet Your Life? It's You Bet Your Life. Which 1960s spy-fi series featured the suave and sophisticated secret agent Napoleon Solo, played by Robert Vaughn? Mission Impossible, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., or The Avengers? That would be The Man from U.N.C.L.E. The 1950s slang cool cat means a musician, a calm and collected individual, or a rebellious teenager. Cool cat means a calm and collected individual. Who directed the romantic comedy Roman Holiday in 1953? George Cukor, Billy Wilder, or William Wyler? And that was directed by William Wyler. In the movie Apocalypse Now from 1979, who played the character Colonel Walter E. Kurtz? Robert Duvall, Martin Sheen, or Marlon Brando? Walter E. Kurtz was played by Marlon Brando. Who was an American serial killer who targeted young women and was active during the 1970s in the Pacific Northwest? Richard Speck, Ted Bundy, or Charles Manson? And that would be Ted Bundy. Not a multiple choice. Which British intelligence officer defected to the Soviet Union in 1963 when it was discovered he was a Soviet double agent? That British intelligence officer was Kim Philby. Who was the Queen of the United Kingdom during the 1950s and 1960s? Queen Elizabeth II, Queen Elizabeth I, or was it Queen Victoria in the 1950s and 60s? It was Queen Elizabeth II. Which magazine, founded in 1952, became the leading source of celebrity gossip and entertainment news during the 1950s? Time, People, or Confidential? That magazine was Confidential. In 1961, which African country declared independence from Belgium, leading to a violent and protracted struggle for independence? Was it Angola? Was it Mozambique? Or was it the Congo? And that country was the Congo. In 1969, an uprising known as the Stonewall Riots occurred in which city, marking a pivotal moment in the LGBTQ+ rights movement? Was it Paris, London, or New York City? And that was New York City. In the 1977 film Star Wars Episode IV, A New Hope, what is the name of the desert planet where Luke Skywalker grows up? Dagobah, Tatooine, or Hoth? And that was the planet Tatooine. Who was the Soviet cosmonaut who became the first woman to travel to space, accomplishing this feat in 1963? Valentina Tereshkova, Svetlana Savitskaya, or Elena Kondakova? And that was Valentina Tereshkova. In the 1960s, which fashion designer popularized the miniskirt? Coco Chanel, Christian Dior, or Mary Quant? The miniskirt was popularized by Mary Quant. Who was the renowned record producer known for his work with the Beatles, producing many of their iconic albums in the 1960s? Brian Wilson, Phil Spector, or George Martin? And that record producer was George Martin. Not a multiple choice. Which 1960s musical, inspired by a controversial book, tackled themes of sexuality, religion, and youthful rebellion? The 1960s musical was Hair. Which fair took place in New York City in the 1960s, featuring the iconic Unisphere? Expo 67, World Expo 70, or the New York World's Fair? And that was the New York World's Fair. Which iconic national park was redesigned in 1971, is known for its unique rock formation? Yosemite National Park, Yellowstone National Park, or Arches National Park? Unique for their rock formations? Arches National Park. What is the title of the 1963 song by Bob Dylan that became an anthem for the civil rights movement? Blowin' in the Wind, Mr. Tambourine Man, or Like a Rolling Stone? And that was Blowin' in the Wind. Which singer-songwriter released the song American Pie in 1971? Was it Neil Young, was it Don McLean, or was it Bob Dylan? American Pie. That was by Don McLean. Who released the song Superstition in 1972? James Brown, Marvin Gaye, or Stevie Wonder? Superstition was released by Stevie Wonder. Which law, passed in the United States in 1970, established the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, Reorganization Plan Number 3, National Environmental Protection Policy Act, or the Clean Air Act? And that was Reorganization Plan Number 3. What iconic fashion trend of the 1970s featured bell-bottom pants, platform shoes, and colorful patterns? Grunge fashion, mod fashion, or disco fashion? Bell-bottoms. That was disco fashion. Not a multiple choice. What treatment was introduced in the 1960s to help women in pain during childbirth? That would be epidural anesthesia. Which brand introduced their commercial video game console in 1977? Nintendo, Atari, or was it Sega? And that brand was Atari. What brand introduced the revolutionary Walkman portable cassette player in 1979? Was it Philips? Was it Sony? Or was it Panasonic? I had one of those by Sony. Which famous American musician died in 1977 at the age of 42? Was it Elvis Presley? Was it Buddy Holly? Or was it Chuck Berry? Who died in 1977? That was Elvis Presley. Which country did an earthquake strike the city of Skopje in 1963? Macedonia, Old Yugoslavia, Chile, or India? Earthquake Skopje is in Macedonia. In 1959, which superhero team was introduced by DC Comics, consisting of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and other heroes? Were they the Avengers? Were they the X-Men? Or was that the Justice League? And of course, that was the Justice League. Which iconic sneaker brand, founded in 1971, quickly gained popularity with its innovative designs and comfortable fit? Was it Reebok? Was it Nike? Or was it Adidas? And that brand was Nike. Is Nike. In 1960, which iconic film camera was introduced, popularizing the concept of instant photography? The Nikon F, the Canon AE-1, or the Polaroid land camera? It was the Polaroid land camera. Which brand is known for its popular Mixette handheld mixer introduced in the 1960s? Hamilton Beach, KitchenAid, or Braun? And that was made by Hamilton Beach. Which 60s TV series features a family of monsters, including Herman, Lily, and Grandpa? The Addams Family, Bewitched, or the Munsters? And that was the Munsters. What 60s show follows the comedic misadventures of a group of doctors and support staff during the Korean War? Hogan's Heroes, MASH, or the Beverly Hillbillies? And that was MASH. Not a multiple choice. In Happy Days, who is known for his catchphrase, "Ayy," and his love for motorcycles? Arthur Fonzie Fazzarelli. The 70s disco hit "Don't Stop Till You Get Enough" was sung by whom? Diana Ross, the Bee Gees, or Michael Jackson? Don't Stop Till You Get Enough by Michael Jackson. Which tech company introduced the first commercially successful word processor, WordStar? IBM, Microsoft, or MicroPro International? The WordStar processor. That was by MicroPro International. Which tech company introduced the first laser printer in 1976? Was it IBM? Was it Xerox? Or was it HP? And that was IBM. Not a multiple choice. What toy introduced in the 1960s allowed children to create various designs by placing small plastic pegs onto a board? They were so much fun. Light Bright. What iconic fashion item of the 1970s was a colorful plastic bracelet worn in multiple layers? The mood ring, platform shoes, or bangles? And those were bangles. What video format, introduced in the 1970s, was popular in Japan and used a smaller cassette than the VHS? Betamax, Laserdisc, or Mini DV? Those were Betamax. Who was the American author known for his best-selling novel, Jaws? Stephen King, Tom Clancy, or Peter Benchley? The author of Jaws, Peter Benchley. Who was the American swimmer who won a record 7 gold medals at the 1972 Olympic Games? Mark Spitz, Michael Phelps, or Greg Louganis? 1972 Olympic Games? Of course, that's Mark Spitz. Which American tennis player dominated the sport in the 1970s and was nicknamed the Ice Maiden? Serena Williams, Chris Evert, or Martina Navratilova? The Ice Maiden, Chrissy Evert. Not a multiple choice. Which influential martial artist and actor who gained popularity in the 1970s with films like Enter the Dragon? And that actor was Bruce Lee. Not a multiple choice. Who did George Foreman famously lose to in the Rumble in the Jungle in 1974. Who did George Foreman famously lose to? It was Muhammad Ali. Okay, Houston, we've had a problem. Is a famous line from the Apollo 13 mission spoken by which astronaut? Alan Shepard, Jack Swigert, or Buzz Aldrin? Houston, we've got a problem. Jack Swigert. Who won the FIFA World Cup in 1978? Brazil, Italy, or Argentina? The FIFA World Cup in '78. That would be Argentina. Which actor rose to fame in the 1970s and became known for his portrayal of Rocky Balboa and John Rambo? Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, or Robert De Niro? Rocky Balboa, Sylvester Stallone. In what year did the iconic British rock band The Beatles officially dissolve? Was it 1970? Was it in 1971? Or was it in 1972? The Beatles officially dissolved in 1970. In 1972, which country's political scandal involved the break-in of the Democratic National Committee headquarters? Was that in the United States, the United Kingdom, or did that take place in Germany? It took place in the United States. Which event marked the end of the Vietnam War in 1975? The fall of Saigon, the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, or the Gulf of Tonkin incident? The end of the Vietnam War, 1975, the fall of Saigon. In which year did the Iranian Revolution lead to the overthrow of the Shah and the establishment of an Islamic Republic? Was that 1976, 1975, or was that in 1979? That took place in 1979. In 1979, which country signed a peace treaty with Israel, becoming the first Arab country to officially recognize Israel's legitimacy? Was it Egypt, Saudi Arabia, or was that Iraq? That first country to recognize Israel was Egypt. Who won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1954 for his fictional writing? Albert Camus, Ernest Hemingway, or Samuel Beckett? The Nobel Prize in Literature in 1954 went to Ernest Hemingway. Which iconic car model was first introduced by Ford in 1954? Was it the Ford Fairlane, the Ford Mustang, or the Ford Thunderbird? First introduced in 1954, it was the Ford Thunderbird. The President of the United States for most of the 1950s was Dwight D. Eisenhower, Harry S. Truman, or John F. Kennedy. For most of the 1950s, the President of the United States was Dwight D. Eisenhower. Who won the first ever Formula One World Drivers' Championship in 1950? Juan Manuel Fangio, Nino Farina, or Sterling Moss? The Formula One Championship in 1950 was won by Nino Farina. Which country became the first to open a nuclear power plant to generate electricity for commercial use in 1954? Was that the United States? Was it the Soviet Union? Or was it the United Kingdom? The first one was the Soviet Union. Not a multiple choice. What iconic jazz album by Miles Davis was released in 1959? Iconic album by Miles Davis. That was Kind of Blue. Which novel by Vladimir Nabokov, notorious for its controversial subject matter, was published in 1955? Lolita, Animal Farm, or On the Road? In 1955, it was Lolita. Which German-British scientist won the Nobel Prize in Physics for his research in quantum mechanics in 1954? Was it Max Born? Was it Erwin Schrödinger? Or was it Paul Dirac? And the answer is Max Born. Who were the first people to the summit of Mount Everest in 1953? Tenzing Norgay and Sir Edmund Hillary, Reinhold Messner and Junko Tabei, or Tenzing Norgay and Junko Tabei? It was Tenzing Norgay and Sir Edmund Hillary. Which novel by J.D. Salinger, focusing on teenage rebellion and angst, was published in 1951? Was it The Catcher in the Rye? Was it To Kill a Mockingbird? Or was it Lord of the Flies? Well, if it's J.D. Salinger, we're talking about The Catcher in the Rye. Which iconic music festival took place in 1969, featuring performances by Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and The Who? The Isle of Wight Festival, Woodstock, or the Monterey Pop Festival? That was Woodstock. What was the name of the youth counterculture movement that emerged in the 1960s? Was that the swing era, the hippie movement, or was it the Roaring Twenties? And that was the hippie movement. Who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964? Was it Mother Teresa? Was it Martin Luther King Jr.? Or was it Nelson Mandela? Nobel Peace Prize in 1964 went to Martin Luther King Jr. What was the name of the first computer network developed by the U.S. Department of Defense in the 1960s? Was it ARPANET? Was it ECPANET? Or was it AirRanet? And that program was called ARPANET. Which movie won the 1967 Academy Award for Best Picture? The Graduate, In the Heat of the Night, or A Man for All Seasons? The 67 Academy Award for Best Picture went to A Man for All Seasons. Not a multiple choice. Which iconic music and comedy venue opened in New York City's Greenwich Village in 1961? That would be The Bitter End. Which influential activist and author wrote the book The Feminine Mystique? Was that Betty Friedan? Was that Gloria Steinem? Or was that Angela Davis? The Feminine Mystique. Betty Friedan. What was the name of the military conflict that took place in a Southeast Asian country during the 1960s and early 1970s? Was it the Korean War, the Gulf War, or was that the Vietnam War? Well, of course, that was the Vietnam War in the 60s. I Have a Dream were famous words by whom? Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, or Jesse Jackson? And that, of course, were words by Martin Luther King Jr. What was the name of the controversial art movement that emerged in the 1960s, challenging traditional notions of art? Was that abstract expressionism? Was it Dadaism? Or was it pop art? That was pop art. Who became the first woman to swim across the English Channel in both directions in 1951? Gertrude Ederle, Florence Chadwick, or was that Diana Nyad? Both directions in 1951. Florence Chadwick did that. Which iconic sports car, known for its sleek design, was introduced by Chevrolet in 1963? Was it the Chevrolet Camaro? Was it the Pontiac GTO, or was it the Chevrolet Corvette Stingray? And that was the Stingray. Which African country gained independence from British colonial rule in 1957? Was it South Africa? Was it Nigeria? Or was it Ghana? And gaining their independence from Great Britain in 57 was Ghana. What year did China conduct its first successful nuclear test? Was it 1954? Was it 1964? Or did they do it in 1974? And they did that in 1964. The term Black Power was coined by which individual in the 1960s? Was it Stokely Carmichael? Was it Malcolm X? Or was it Martin Luther King Jr.? Black Power was coined by Stokely Carmichael. Which iconic American landmark, located in Seattle, was built during the 1960s? Was that the Empire State Building? Was it the Statue of Liberty? Or was that the Space Needle? That was the Space Needle. Which African American won an Olympic gold medal in the 100-meter dash during the 1968 Olympics, setting a record in the process? Jim Hines, Tommy Smith, or was that Carl Lewis? And that was Jim Hines in the 1968 Olympics. Which iconic band released the album Abbey Road in 1969? Was that the Beatles? Was it the Rolling Stones? Or was it The Who? Abbey Road in 1969. Well, yes, that's the Beatles. Who were the founders of the Black Panther Party, established in 1966? Angela Davis and Bobby Seale, Eldridge Cleaver and Angela Davis, or Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale? The founders of the Black Panther movement, Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. Which two superpowers were directly involved in the construction of the Berlin Wall in 1961? The Soviet Union and United Kingdom, the United States and West Germany, or the United States and the Soviet Union? The United States and the Soviet Union. Which American television sitcom, set in the 1970s, depicted the daily lives of the Cunningham family and their friends? Was it Happy Days? Was it the Brady Bunch? Or was it All in the Family? Well, the Cunninghams. That was Happy Days. In 1975, the Khmer Rouge, led by Pol Pot, took control of which Southeast Asian country? Was it Laos? Was it Cambodia? Or was it Thailand? Khmer Rouge, led by Pol Pot, they got Cambodia. Which terrorist group was responsible for the attack on the Israeli team during the 1972 Olympic Games in Munich? Was it the Red Army faction? Was it Black September? Or was it the Irish Republican Army? That was Black September. Which American president signed the Helsinki Accords in 1975? Was it Jimmy Carter? Was it Gerald Ford? Or was it Richard Nixon in 1975? In 75, that would be Gerald Ford. In 1975, which country gained independence from Portugal and became a sovereign nation? Was it Mozambique? Was it Cape Verde? Or was it Guinea-Bissau that gained independence from Portugal? That would be Mozambique. Which famous band released the album The Dark Side of the Moon in 1973? Was it the Beatles? Was it Led Zeppelin? Or was it Pink Floyd? In 1973, The Dark Side of the Moon was by Pink Floyd. In 1978, the world's first test tube baby, Louise Brown, was born through which medical procedure? Gene therapy, in vitro fertilization, IVF, or cloning? Louise Brown, in vitro fertilization. Which popular children's television show, featuring characters like Big Bird and Cookie Monster, made its debut in 1969? The Muppet Show, Sesame Street, or Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? Well, of course, that's Sesame Street. Which British driver won the Formula One World Championship in 1976? Was that James Hunt? Was it Niki Lauda? Or was that Jackie Stewart? The Formula One Championship in 1976. James Hunt. What international conflict involved disputes over the Kashmir region, flaring up again in 1965? The Vietnam War, the Suez Crisis, or the Indo-Pakistani War? The Kashmir region. That was the Indo-Pakistani War. Who served as the Secretary General of the United Nations from 1962 to 1971? Dag Hammarskjöld, U Thant, or Kofi Annan? The Secretary General of the United Nations, that was U Thant. The chairman of the Chinese Communist Party from the 1950s to the 1970s was Deng Xiaoping, Lin Biao, or Mao Zedong? And that was Mao Zedong. Who served as the Prime Minister of Canada from 1968 to 1979? Pierre Trudeau, Lester B. Pearson, or John Diefenbacher? From 68 to 79, that was Pierre Trudeau. Who was the British artist famous for his pop art and works like Wham! And Drowning Girl, which emerged in the 1950s? David Hockney, Richard Hamilton, or Roy Lichtenstein? And that would be Roy Lichtenstein. Which British TV series, initially broadcast from 1955 to 1965, featured a time-traveling police box known as the TARDIS? Doctor Who, Sherlock, or Downton Abbey? And that show was Doctor Who. And question 100. Who was Australia's first woman to hold a cabinet position in the Australian government in the early 1950s? Julia Gillard, Dame Enid Lyons, or Gladys Berejiklian? And that was Dame Enid Lyons. And that's all I've got for today. Thank you for playing. Drop your score in the comments section, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell. This has been Quiz Time, and we'll see you in the next video.